Every person who achieves extraordinary things has a measurably different brain structure than those who don't. This isn't genetics, it's the result of specific practices that literally reshape neural tissue. Your anterior mid-cingulate cortex physically grows when you consistently engage in difficult tasks you don't want to do but choose to do anyway. This brain region is directly associated with tenacity and goal achievement. The anterior mid-cingulate cortex sits at the intersection of emotion, cognition, and motor control, making it uniquely positioned to govern your capacity for sustained effort in challenging situations. When researchers examine the brains of ultramarathon runners, Navy SEALs, and other individuals known for exceptional mental toughness, they consistently find enlarged anterior mid-cingulate cortex regions compared to the general population. What makes this discovery revolutionary is that this growth isn't predetermined by genetics. The anterior mid-cingulate cortex responds rapidly to environmental demands through a process called activity-dependent neuroplasticity. When you force yourself to continue a challenging task, despite wanting to quit, you create specific patterns of neural activation that trigger the release of brain-derived neurotrophic factor, or BDNF. This protein acts like fertilizer for neurons, promoting the growth of new dendrites and strengthening existing synaptic connections. The threshold for activation appears to be psychological discomfort combined with continued engagement. Simply doing difficult things you enjoy won't produce the same effect. The anterior mid-cingulate cortex specifically responds to the conflict between your immediate desires and your chosen actions. This is why cold exposure, challenging physical exercise, and other deliberately uncomfortable practices have become so popular among high achievers. They're literally building the brain architecture of resilience. Studies using functional magnetic resonance imaging show that this region becomes more active within minutes of beginning a challenging task, but the structural changes require consistent activation over weeks to months. The density of gray matter in this area correlates directly with measures of grit, persistence, and the ability to delay gratification traits universally associated with long-term success. Perhaps most importantly, this neuroplasticity transfers across domains. Someone who builds their anterior mid-cingulate cortex through physical challenges will demonstrate increased mental toughness in intellectual pursuits, career challenges, and relationship difficulties. The brain doesn't distinguish between types of voluntary hardship. It simply recognizes the pattern of choosing difficulty over ease and reinforces the neural circuits that support that choice. This means every time you push through resistance, you're not just accomplishing a specific task, you're upgrading your fundamental capacity for achievement. Your brain is literally rewiring itself to become more capable of sustained effort in all areas of life. True motivation comes from finding satisfaction in effort itself, not just outcomes. Celebrating the moment you choose difficulty rewires your reward system for sustainable achievement rather than external validation dependency. The dopaminergic system operates through two distinct pathways that determine whether you build sustainable motivation or create addiction-like dependency on external rewards. The mesolimbic pathway responds to unexpected rewards and novel experiences, creating the pleasure spikes most people associate with dopamine. However, this system habituates quickly, requiring increasingly intense stimuli to produce the same motivational effect. This is why people who rely primarily on external validation, social media likes, or achievement badges often find themselves trapped in cycles of diminishing returns. The mesocortical pathway, by contrast, governs sustained motivation and executive function. This system responds not to pleasure itself, but to the anticipation of meaningful progress toward goals. When you learn to derive satisfaction from the process of overcoming difficulty, you're activating this more sustainable dopaminergic circuit. The key distinction is that mesocortical dopamine doesn't deplete with use, it actually strengthens through consistent activation. Neuroscientist research reveals that baseline dopamine levels determine your overall capacity for motivation and focus. People with higher baseline dopamine demonstrate greater persistence, better cognitive flexibility, and increased willingness to engage in challenging tasks. The problem with modern reward systems is that they create massive dopamine spikes followed by inevitable crashes below baseline. This creates what researchers call dopamine dysregulation, a state where ordinary activities lose their motivational pull because they can't compete with the artificial highs. The solution involves a practice called effort-based reward. Instead of celebrating only outcomes, you consciously acknowledge and appreciate the moment you choose to engage in difficulty. This might mean taking a moment to recognize when you start a workout despite not feeling like it, or appreciating the decision to continue working on a challenging project when you'd rather scroll social media. This isn't positive thinking, it's deliberate neurochemical conditioning. Brain imaging studies show that people who practice effort-based reward develop increased activity in the prefrontal cortex during challenging tasks, along with more stable dopamine release patterns. They become intrinsically motivated rather than externally driven. The timing of this internal recognition is crucial. It must happen at the moment of choosing difficulty, not after completing the task. This creates what neuroscientists call process-focused reward circuits that make challenging activities inherently satisfying rather than merely means to external ends. Controlled stress followed by recovery creates stress inoculation, making your nervous system more resilient and adaptable. The goal is to modulate stress, not eliminate it. The human stress response system evolved to optimize performance under challenging conditions, not to create the chronic overwhelm that characterizes modern life. When you understand the difference between acute and chronic stress activation, you gain access to one of the most powerful tools for accelerating learning and performance enhancement. Acute stress triggers the release of norepinephrine and cortisol in precise ratios that enhance focus, memory consolidation, and physical performance. This neurochemical cocktail literally makes your brain more plastic and receptive to new information. The key mechanism involves the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis, which coordinates your body's response to challenge. During acute stress episodes lasting 15-20 minutes, cortisol levels spike and then return to baseline, creating what researchers call hormetic stress that strengthens rather than depletes your system. This process enhances the expression of genes associated with neuroplasticity, increases the production of new neurons in the hippocampus, and strengthens the connections between brain regions responsible for learning and memory. Chronic stress, however, creates the opposite effect. When cortisol remains elevated for extended periods, it becomes neurotoxic, literally shrinking brain tissue in areas critical for decision-making and emotional regulation. The hippocampus, which forms new memories, is particularly vulnerable to chronic cortisol exposure. This is why people under chronic stress often experience memory problems, difficulty learning new skills, and reduced cognitive flexibility. The protocol for beneficial stress involves deliberately inducing controlled challenge followed by complete recovery. Cold exposure, high-intensity exercise, breath-holding practices, and challenging cognitive tasks all create acute stress responses when applied correctly. The critical factor is duration and recovery. Sessions should be intense enough to elevate heart rate and create psychological pressure, but short enough to avoid chronic activation, typically 15-30 minutes, followed by equal or longer recovery periods. Research on stress inoculation shows that people who regularly expose themselves to controlled stress develop measurably different stress response patterns. Their nervous systems become more efficient at activating stress responses when needed and more effective at returning to baseline afterward. They demonstrate increased resilience not just to physical challenges, but to psychological stressors, social pressure, and cognitive demands. This adaptation, called cross-stressor adaptation, means that building stress resilience in one domain transfers to improved performance across all areas of life. Selective and sustained attention can be systematically developed through 13 20-minute daily practices that require redirecting wandering attention back to a chosen target. The neuroscience of attention reveals that focus operates through distinct but interconnected neural networks that can be strengthened through specific training protocols. The frontoparietal attention network governs selective attention, your ability to direct mental resources toward chosen stimuli while filtering out distractions. The executive control network manages sustained attention, your capacity to maintain focus over extended periods despite competing demands. These networks function independently, which explains why someone might excel at intense short-term focus but struggle with sustained concentration, or vice versa. Attention training works through a process called metacognitive awareness, your ability to notice when your mind has wandered and consciously redirect it back to your chosen target. This seemingly simple act creates measurable changes in brain structure within weeks of consistent practice. Neuroimaging studies show increased gray matter density in the anterior cingulate cortex and prefrontal cortex, regions critical for cognitive control and attention regulation. The insula, which processes internal bodily sensations and maintains awareness of your mental state, also shows enhanced activation after attention training. The 13 20-minute time frame appears optimal because it matches your brain's natural attention cycles while providing sufficient challenge to trigger neuroplastic changes. Sessions shorter than 13 minutes don't create enough cognitive load to drive adaptation, while sessions longer than 20 minutes often lead to mental fatigue that reduces training effectiveness. During these sessions, the key is not to maintain perfect focus that's impossible and counterproductive. Instead, the goal is to notice when your attention drifts and gently redirect it back to your chosen anchor. This redirection process strengthens what neuroscientists call cognitive flexibility, your brain's ability to switch between different mental tasks and adapt to changing demands. Each time you catch your wandering mind and return to focus, you're literally exercising the neural circuits responsible for executive control. Brain imaging reveals that people who engage in regular attention training show increased activation in the dorsolateral prefrontal cortex when performing challenging cognitive tasks, indicating more efficient use of mental resources. The target for attention training can be anything that requires sustained focus, breathing patterns, physical sensations, visual objects, or even cognitive tasks like mental arithmetic. The specific target matters less than the consistency of practice and the quality of metacognitive awareness. Research demonstrates that benefits transfer across domains. People who train attention through breath focus show improved concentration during reading, problem solving, and social interactions. Design friction around unwanted behaviors and remove friction from desired behaviors. Your brain automatically chooses the path of least resistance, so make achievement the easier path. The human brain operates as a prediction machine, constantly calculating the energy costs of different behavioral options and defaulting to actions that require minimal cognitive resources. This tendency, called cognitive ease, governs far more of your behavior than conscious decision-making. Understanding this principle allows you to engineer environments that automatically guide you toward productive choices without relying on willpower or motivation. Environmental design works through what behavioral scientists call choice architecture. The context in which decisions are presented influences behavior more powerfully than conscious intentions. Your prefrontal cortex, responsible for executive decisions, has limited daily capacity. Every choice you make, from what to wear to what to eat to how to respond to notifications, depletes this finite resource. By the end of a typical day, most people have significantly reduced capacity for self-control and decision-making, which explains why evening hours are often when people abandon their goals. The solution involves creating what researchers term environmental scaffolding, physical and digital arrangements that make desired behaviors automatic while creating barriers to unwanted behaviors. This operates through several psychological mechanisms simultaneously. First, it reduces decision fatigue by minimizing the number of choices you need to make throughout the day. Second, It leverages implementation intentions, pre-decided behavioral responses to specific environmental cues. Third, it exploits the brain's tendency to associate physical locations with specific behavioral patterns. Physical environment modifications create the most powerful behavioral changes. Placing books in visible locations while storing your phone in another room automatically shifts your attention toward reading. Laying out workout clothes the night before eliminates the friction of getting dressed for exercise when motivation is low. Preparing healthy meals in advance removes the cognitive load of making food choices when you're hungry and your prefrontal cortex is compromised. Digital environment design is equally important in modern life. Removing social media apps from your phone's home screen creates enough friction to interrupt automatic scrolling behaviors. Using website blockers during focused work periods eliminates the possibility of distraction without requiring ongoing willpower. Setting your phone to grayscale mode reduces the visual appeal of attention-grabbing applications, making them less compelling. The key principle is asymmetric friction, making unwanted behaviors require more steps while reducing the steps required for desired behaviors. This doesn't eliminate choice. It simply changes the default pathway. When healthy, productive behaviors become easier than their alternatives, you naturally gravitate toward them without conscious effort. Small daily actions compound exponentially through neuroplastic changes. Daily 30-minute practice outperforms weekly 5-hour sessions because frequent neuroplastic events build more robust neural networks. Neuroplasticity operates on precise temporal dynamics that most people misunderstand, leading to ineffective training approaches that waste time and create frustration. Your brain's capacity for structural and functional change follows specific patterns that favor distributed practice over massed practice. This isn't simply about habit formation, it's about optimizing the biological processes that literally reshape your neural architecture. The molecular mechanisms underlying neuroplasticity require specific timing to maximize effectiveness. When you engage in challenging practice, your neurons release brain-derived neurotrophic factor and other growth proteins that promote synaptic strengthening and new dendritic growth. However, these proteins have limited half-lives, typically degrading within 24-48 hours. Daily practice ensures these neuroplastic factors remain consistently elevated, creating sustained periods of enhanced brain adaptability. Weekly practice, even if longer in duration, allows these crucial proteins to return to baseline between sessions, significantly reducing the cumulative neuroplastic effect. Sleep plays a critical role in consolidating neuroplastic changes initiated during practice sessions. During slow-wave sleep, your brain replays the neural patterns activated during learning, strengthening the synaptic connections that encode new skills and behaviors. This process, called systems consolidation, transfers information from temporary storage in the hippocampus to permanent storage in the neocortex. Daily practice creates more frequent consolidation opportunities, allowing each night's sleep to reinforce the previous day's neuroplastic changes before they decay. The spacing effect, first documented over a century ago, demonstrates that information learned through distributed sessions is retained significantly longer than information crammed into intensive sessions. Modern neuroscience reveals the mechanism. Spaced practice creates multiple encoding opportunities that strengthen different aspects of the same neural network. Each practice session activates slightly different combinations of neurons, creating redundant pathways that make the overall network more resilient and accessible. Consistency also builds what neuroscientists call learning momentum, a state where your brain becomes increasingly efficient at acquiring new information within specific domains. Regular practice doesn't just strengthen existing neural pathways, it enhances your brain's general capacity for plasticity within that skill area. This explains why musicians who practice daily show accelerated learning of new pieces compared to those who practice sporadically, even when total practice time is equivalent. The brain becomes better at being plastic, creating positive feedback loops that accelerate skill acquisition over time. Your nervous system is designed to adapt and optimize based on the demands you place on it. Every day, you're either building the neural architecture of achievement or allowing it to deteriorate through neglect. There's no neutral ground. Your brain is constantly changing based on your choices and behaviors. The difference between people who achieve their goals and those who don't isn't talent, luck, or circumstances. It's understanding and applying the fundamental principles of how human neurobiology responds to challenge, stress, and focused attention. You already possess the hardware required for extraordinary achievement. Your brain contains approximately 86 billion neurons, each capable of forming thousands of connections. The question isn't whether you have the capacity, the question is whether you're going to systematically develop and direct that capacity toward meaningful goals. The protocols exist. The science is clear. The only variable is your commitment to implementing what actually works rather than what feels comfortable or familiar.